Counter-protesters took to the streets of the UK following a week of far-right rioting fueled by misinformation over a stabbing attack against young girls. Danish high schools are deciding to block disruptive sites like social media to keep students focused while they're in class.
The race for the medal table top spot intensifies as the US and China climb their way up with new golds.
July was the second hottest month ever recorded. According to data published on Thursday by the European Climate Agency Copernicus, the air temperature averaged 16.91 degrees Celsius. The margin with July 2023, the hottest month on record, is very small, just 0.04 decimal points, but other records were set this month.
Un autre aspect remarquable du mois de juillet, nous avons vu les deux jours les plus chauds jamais enregistrés. Donc le mois de juillet a été, à sa façon, aussi un mois record, même si la moyenne sur l'ensemble du mois est légèrement inférieure à celle du mois de juillet 2023.
These indications bring to an end a cycle of 13 consecutive monthly temperature records, which began in June last year. But for Copernicus experts, the margin between the data observed between 2023 and 2024 is so slim that the overall context of global warming remains the same.
Les conséquences du réchauffement climatique, elles n'ont pas commencé au début de cette série. Cela fait un certain nombre d'années que nous les observons. Et la fin de cette série de records ne va pas marquer non plus la fin des conséquences du réchauffement climatique. Les vagues de chaleur, les événements climatiques extrêmes ont commencé avant cette série de records et elles vont se continuer après.
In Europe, it was mainly the south and east of the continent that experienced the highest temperature anomalies in July. In contrast, the west saw average or even slightly lower temperatures compared to last year.
Far-right demonstrations anticipated by UK police across the country failed to materialise as peaceful anti-racism protesters showed up instead. Police had braced themselves for more violence following a week of rioting and disorder fueled by misinformation over a stabbing attack against young girls in Southport. Stand Up to Racism and other groups planned counter-protests, but in most places were instead met with no opposition. Large, peaceful crowds gathered outside agencies and law firms specialising in immigration, which had been listed by internet groups as possible targets of far-right activity. It was a vast change from rioting that erupted throughout parts of the UK since July the 30th. Far-right extremists had clashed with police, fueled by misinformation about the stabbing attack that killed 3 girls in Southport. Social media users falsely identified the suspect as an immigrant and a Muslim. Upcoming Taylor Swift concerts in Vienna were cancelled after Austrian authorities arrested a 19-year-old man for allegedly plotting an attack in connection with the events. The man was arrested in Ternitz, south of Vienna, and a second man who was believed to be in contact with the first suspect was arrested in the Austrian capital itself.
Nach dem derzeitigen Ermittlungsstand haben sich die Beschuldigten im Internet radikalisiert. Der 19-jährige niederösterreichische Staatsangehörige Staatsbürger hat Anfang Juli einen Treueschwur auf den aktuellen Anführer des IS geleistet. In der Folge haben die Beschuldigten konkrete Vorbereitungshandlungen zu einem terroristischen Anschlag getroffen.
Local media say that the man was previously known to authorities as a terrorism suspect. Authorities were tipped off about the attack by a foreign security service, and the man was reportedly arrested following a large police operation with over 100 nearby residents evacuated. All 3 of Swift's upcoming sold-out concerts at the Ernst Happel Stadium in Vienna were cancelled following the arrests. With the summer holidays coming to an end, several Danish high schools are deciding to block disruptive sites to keep students focused during the academic term. Social media, streaming, shopping, and games are included in the block sites to fight against the disruptive impact of the internet. The decision comes following new recommendations from the Danish Ministry of Children and Education.
Der nogle sider, der frister mere end andre sider, og der kan jo være fornuft i at lukke dem ned, så man ikke bliver fristet.
Men er det ikke at være lidt formynderisk over for eleverne, at I ligesom skal gå ind og fortælle dem, hvad de må og hvad de ikke må?
Nej, det synes jeg ikke. Vi har ansvar for, at de får en rigtig god uddannelse.
Despite best intentions, some students are critical of the new policy.
Vi var alle sammen meget sådan, at det var lidt nederen, ikke? At man ikke selv kunne få lov til at gå ind på, hvad man ville. Som elev tror jeg også, man føler lidt, at nogle af ens rettigheder eller friheder bliver taget fra en.
Over the next year, schools will find out whether the decision really is student-proof.
The Austrian branch of the climate action group Last Generation announced that they are disbanding and ending their protests. Activists say that they aren't seeing any prospect for success and that the government is not responding to their requests.
Protestform war zu dem Zeitpunkt, zu dem wir uns dazu entschlossen haben, unbedingt notwendig. Also wir brauchten auch eine gewisse Alltagsdisruption. Und am Ende des Tages ist das Problem des Scheiterns ja eher das, dass sich nicht genug Menschen getraut haben, nicht den Mut hatten, gegen die Regierung jetzt wirklich friedlich aufzustehen und sich dagegen zu lehnen.
Last Generation had several tactics, but mostly relied on disruptive forms of action. One of the group's infamous acts includes blocking traffic by gluing themselves to busy roads and airport tarmacs. Communication experts say that this form of disruption does catch the public's attention, but is often short-lived and does not result in political change.
Ich sehe besser so, meiner Meinung nach, weil sie nichts erreichen damit.
Warum?
Weil das auf einer hohen Ebene entschieden werden muss und nicht auf der Straße.
Finde ich nicht so gut, weil die Aufmerksamkeit der Klimaaktivisten schon dazu beigetragen hat, dass die Menschen sich ein bisschen Gedanken machen.
Activists of the group claim that this does not mean the resistance is over, but instead that it is time for new and different campaigns to form.
15 Russian athletes competing at this year's Olympics have an uneasy status as individual neutral athletes. Some in the Olympic Village oppose them taking part, and Russian opinion is divided, with some Russian politicians describing those competing as traitors. Activists gathered information from Russian athletes' social media leading up to the Games, flagging posts they considered showed support for the war. One of these was allegedly Diana Schneider, who became one of the first Russians to win a medal at the Paris Olympics after taking silver in women's doubles.
You published in February 2022 two posts on, you liked two posts on Instagram.
I'm not going to answer anything about politics here.
Okay, my question was only, do you regret it and your position has changed or not?
No, no comments about it. I'm here to talk about tennis and my game today.
Ukraine wanted Russian athletes excluded and opposed Olympic efforts to include them as neutral athletes. Ukraine briefly boycotted Olympic qualifying competitions that allowed Russians to attend, but changed their policy, facing the risk of not being represented at the Olympics at all.
Ми всі прекрасно знаємо, звідки ці атлети, в принципі, і вони не сказали жодного слова проти війни, тобто вони не висловилися за мир навіть. Тому я вважаю, що це дуже прикро, тому що Олімпійські ігри – це про мир. І, в принципі, завжди всі війни зупинялися на період. Але Росія не зупинилася, і в період цих ігор були масовані атаки на міста України. І тому, як терориста можна допустити до змагань про мир?
It is quite literally the food of champions, and organizers of the Paris Olympics are determined that it will not go to waste. Food that goes on eating at the Games by athletes, spectators and workers is helping those in need around the French capital, an effort to cut down on waste and contribute to sustainability.
Since the beginning, we've received about, for this warehouse here in Gennevilliers, we've received about 15 tons, and overall, with the other warehouse in Paris, about 30 tons.
Some of the bounty collected by the food bank was brought to a grocery store in Épinay-sur-Seine, a northern suburb of Paris that sells food at deeply discounted prices.
Oui, on profite parce que ça nous aide. Ça nous aide normalement. Nous, les gens qui n'ont pas beaucoup de salaire, on est d'aller acheter au magasin cher, on achète moins cher ici.
In addition to helping those in need, organizers say they hope the food donations will set an example for other Olympics to follow.
China and the US keep battling for the top of the medal table of the Paris Olympics. Team America won gold in women's team pursuit and in the men's 400 meters with an incredible comeback by Quincy Hall. China responded with victories in the men's 61-kilo weightlifting and in artistic swimming. On the EU side of things, the Netherlands rack up a new gold in women's dinghy to narrow the gap with Italy. And in boxing, Taiwan's Lin Yuting advanced to the featherweight gold medal bout in the face of ongoing misconceptions about her gender.